A relationship is like a dance. It takes two to tango. Want to have healthy and successful relationships filled with passion, fun, and harmony? Hi, and welcome to the Two to Tango Show with Linda Sutton, a podcast that explores how we can improve your relationships with God, yourself, your intimate partners, and the community. Tune in and learn actionable insights and tips you can use to improve your relationships. The battle of the sexes ends here. Join Linda Sutton today and take your relationships to a whole new level while having fun every step of the way.
Welcome to the Two Tango Show, where our role and our goal is to help you with all of your relationships, from your relationship with God and self, intimate partner and family, community, nature, and nations. Hi, I am your host and usually doing the most, Linda Sutton, and I'm so excited to be sharing with you. Follow me, follow me, follow me. Follow me. Exactly. That's right. We are continuing in this series of the anatomy of a tango. And today we're going to be talking about the second element of the roles of the tango, the positions and roles of the tango, and that is that of the follower. Now, every time I think about and teach about being what it means to be a follower, there's several key elements that come up to mind when I think about following, and that song is one of them. It's an old, I believe, an old house song that comes to mind, genre of music called house music. And so it makes me think of that. It also makes me think of kind of when they talk about Jesus and they talk about the followers for people that are Christian, where Jesus said, follow me, and people had to make a decision. His disciples had to make a decision to drop them. So that comes to mind. But even more pronounced now is the idea of following in social media. So, social media has completely recontextualized what it means to follow someone or to be a follower. And so, I want to make sure that I talk about that up front. So, as we talk about what it means to be a follower in the realm of Tango, we can see what kind of disconnects are possibly occurring between leaders and followers and men and women, merely from the standpoint of now we've got this new term called to be a follower in social media that recontextualizes that leader follower relationship. All right. So, uh, it was fascinating to me because I was involved with Tango, as social media was emerging and evolving and taking on different forms through different platforms. And of course, the most pronounced one and the one in the forefront now is Facebook in terms of being a follower or following someone. And I must admit, I had a great deal of resistance to that, much like I did in Tango, to this idea of becoming a follower in the social media arena, simply because I had such an intimate understanding of what it meant to be a follower as it relates to Tango. And so in Tango, to be a follower is a very serious, critical, position to take and assume, and it's not one that you assume lightly. So the idea of just taking clicking a button and just choosing to follow all of these hundreds and hundreds of people without really giving some thought to who I'm following and why, and whether or not I want to be a follower under their leadership. I was thinking all those things when other people were just like, oh, just click a button, it's not that big a deal. Uh, and I caution you because, and one of the reasons that I'm leading with the ideas and the ways that we use the term follower loosely is because it is governing and influencing the way that people see following in general, following in the dance, and following in the dance of relationships. So, whenever I think of follower or following without understanding, I think of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. So, some people may or may not be familiar with the childhood story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin And if you haven't, you definitely want to revisit that, because I think if you read the story now with the fresh eyes and a new lens and an adult understanding, I think you'll have a completely different understanding of the message and moral behind that fairy tale and that childhood story. But there was some premise around why, what kind of agreement the Pied Piper. There's several different countries and different cultures have a slightly different take on the story, but in a nutshell, there was a relationship between the Pied Piper and or the mayor and or the city to remove rats. So there was some sort of rodent or some sort of infestation that the mayor or the city wanted to get rid of, or some sort of something that was plaguing the city that they wanted to remove or get rid of. And the Pied Piper had a skill set that he could use, mainly his instrumentation, to play such beautiful music in a way that would lure or influence the rodent or the infestation or whatever the problem was, depending on the culture, and lure it away. And so he made the agreement. He did that. He lured, in some stories, the rodents away from the city and got them out of the city. And then when it was time for him to collect his payment or what was agreed upon, they decided not to keep up their end of the bargain. And so, kind of in a condensed version of the story, the Pied Piper decided to lead the children away. So he used the same skill to play music to entice the children to follow him. And he led the children away from the city because they followed him. They followed the music. They were lured by just kind of how melodic it was and soothing, and kind of was able to cast a spell of some sort over them through the music and let them out of the city. Some people said just let them out into the wilderness, never to be found again. Some said he let them to their demise. But whatever it is that the Pied Piper of Hamelin is known for leading the children away from the city to a negative outcome. And that always sticks with me whenever I think of following, because when we follow without an understanding of who we're following and what their intentions are, then we can, even though the allure and the lure appears harmless and favorable and entertaining, it could be leading us to our demise. So I'm always very, very sensitive when it comes to following, because that's what comes to mind. So follow. Now let's talk about following as it relates to Tango. I know people are like, now, oh my gosh, like I got to completely rethink this thing. I definitely think of that when it comes to social media, because those are the same questions that you'll find will come up, not only in addressing things like social media, but also in terms of following leadership of any kind, and especially leadership in the dance. So I really want my followers and my leaders to really keep that story in the back of your mind, and the types of questions it provokes as we go through this primer on what it means to be a follower in Tango. So follower in Tango is one of the not necessarily in order, the second position in Argentine Tango. It is the position that is taken by the woman. It is the yin energy of the dance, or the feminine energy of the dance. So its position is to face away from the flow of traffic. It is actually facing the follower, and the follower is facing the man or the leader. And as a result, not only is the follower able to see directly, obviously, the man or the leader, but also can have a position where they can see what's going on behind them as a couple. So the place that they've left, what's going on behind them, because they're facing that way. That's the perspective that they're holding, where the couple has been, and also some things that are coming upon the couple. So what is approaching the couple from behind? The follower is in a position to see that. Very, very important, because literally the follower is in a position of watching the back of the leader. Please remember that in relationships, because the follower, because they are facing away from the traffic, Yes, the leader is facing and can see where things are going, where the couple is going, and leading the couple in that direction. But because the follower is facing away from the traffic and looking at what's going on behind, the follower is in the position to um, have the back, have the leader's back, or watch the leader's back if the follower is dancing with their eyes open. Once again, the leader and follower role are equal in value. They are complementary, though opposite. They are complementary and they are interdependent. As I've said previously multiple times, that there is no leader without a follower. So actually, the dance technically begins with the follower. The follower is the starting point for the tango. In the tango, the yin energy is responsible for inspiration. They inspire the desire to dance. Okay. I liken it to saying whenever I'm coaching gentlemen or teaching classes, we laugh because, I say very playfully, I was like, the reason that gentlemen are doing all of this and going through all of these dramas and jumping through all these hoops to learn this dance is because they see a beautiful woman or a woman that they want to engage with in that way. And so the way to engage with them in this manner that is close and intimate, but still respectful and still has boundaries, is through the tango. And so even culturally, like in some cultures, partner dance, young men and young women in other cultures are not, if they're not married, they're not able to be in such close physical proximity with one another unless it's in the context of something like a dance. And so in dance, that's an acceptable way for young unmarried people to be social with one another in a respectful, safe way with rules and boundaries that they would not otherwise be allowed to engage in outside of the dance environment. So you see that in dances all around the world. Courtship dances is where a lot of these dances arise out of. So this is a safe place and is usually inspired by the fact that the young man has a young woman that he would like to be in closer proximity to. He would like to be given permission to be in closer proximity to her. So she inspires his efforts she inspires his effort to gain the skills so that he can gain that permission. Okay. So she inspires him to gain the skills that he needs to be a dancer in this case, so that as a good dancer, he can gain the permission to be allowed to be in close proximity, and she'll trust him in that close proximity to her. So the yin provides inspiration. The yin receives or accepts the invitation that yang gives, and also receive as and accepts the energy that yang gives. So remember, if you listened in the previous episode, and if you haven't, you want to go back to that in terms of the anatomy of tango on what it means to be a leader, how to be a leader. We talked about how yang provides the invitation to dance, as well as provides the impulse and energy that moves the couple. So the yin is the part that receives the invitation, accepts the invitation, but also accepts the energy that the leader is providing. The yin also provides feedback. So remember, I said that the leader is responsible for sending energy and then receiving feedback on what they did. So they lead something and then they watch and see if what comes out is what they intended. So they're receiving feedback from their partner or the situation on what they've done so that they can correct or make adjustments. Well, yin's responsibility is as they're receiving the energy, what results provides feedback. So their role in giving, in executing, and being an example of the execution is that they're responsible for giving feedback to the yang or to the leader about what is the result of their lead. So they led something, they are the physical representation of what was led. So if it worked out, the leader can see or feel or sense in the woman's body. If it did work out, they can feel and sense that. If it didn't work out, they can see, feel, or sense that, and then make the adjustments. So this is important because you see this definitely on and off the dance floor, both on and off the dance floor in terms of providing feedback. The yin's role, the feminine role, the role of the follower, the role of the woman is to provide the leader feedback on his lead. That's her role, to let him know if his lead is going according to plan. um, Another thing that yin does is a concept that's calling collecting. And so I will do a whole episode on just the concept of collecting, because collecting is not only a core principle of the dance, but it's actually one of the ancient secrets that I teach and I coach in whenever I do advanced training. So collecting is a really, really powerful thing. And basically, just so that you have a basic understanding of collecting, collecting is whenever you lead a step, the step has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so you send the energy gets executed, and then you have to bring all of that energy to a close, or you bring that idea to a close by collecting the energy so that you can use that energy for the next step. So it's kind of like writing an essay. Every time you write an essay, you write a sentence, it's an idea. A paragraph is a series of sentences of a similar idea. And then once you finish that, you go to the next paragraph. But the important part of writing an essay is making sure you have punctuation marks. And punctuation lets you know the beginning and end of a sentence, the beginning and end of an idea. And then the paragraph breaks let you know is the beginning and end of several sets of ideas. And so, equally in the dance, when the man leads something, he leads it. It has a beginning, a middle of it, and an end. And the end lets you know it's the end of the one idea before he leads the next idea. Now, they do flow into from one idea to the next, much like an essay or a novel flows from one idea to the next, one scene to the next, one scenario to the next, one conversation to the next, like in a book or an essay or a thesis. Similarly, in the dance, you see that as well. The place that closes one idea and sets the stage for the next idea to emerge in tango is called the collect. It's where the couple or the individual, definitely the leader, the follower first, brings their feet together underneath them so that their body is in alignment and in position, the strongest position to go into the next idea. Now, the gentleman can override that on purpose, but her strongest position is to have all her feet and her energy and her spine and her alignment gathered underneath her at the end of an idea to indicate to him that she's in the most stable and aligned position to receive the next instruction. And so that is her responsibility as well. Her responsibility is to at least attempt to execute the entire idea from beginning, middle, and end. If he tries to rush her or get ahead of himself, that's usually where you see errors. That's usually where you see people getting hurt and injured and the like. So it's really important to understand those elements of yin, the feminine aspect, the follower in the follower position in the dance. Very, very different, the opposite of the leader, but also complementary. They work in concert with one another. It's a flow of energy back and forth between the two in a very, very fluid dance. So now, in talking about what it meant to be a leader or how to be a leader, I went back to actually the actual definition of to lead. And I'm going to do the same thing similarly here. Like, what is the definition? What does the word to follow mean? Because once again, inherent in the word is some of the principles just by definition. As I said in one of the very first episodes, that these positions are not a function of culture, They are a function of design. They're a function of purpose. So they're defined by design, not defined by cultural and societal roles. Just like a hammer is designed to hit a nail. Like you can use it for other things, but that is not what it was designed to do. So you can use it outside of purpose, but its purpose, its design, its the original intention for a hammer was to use it to pound nails. Or the other end, remove those nails. So to follow means to go after or move or travel after, like as in a sequence. So once something is done, to follow means that you travel or move or go after a thing in sequence. Makes sense because in Tango, what the follower does is a function of something that happens after the leader does something. To follow means to go along a path or route. So a leader provides direction and guidance along a path or route. To follow means to go along that path or route. To be a logical consequence of something. So that is what a follower is. And so we talked about how in the previous episode, when a leader does something, the reason that they're responsible or it's their fault, as we talked about the difference between fault and responsibility, is because their action creates a reaction or a consequence. And so therefore they're responsible to that consequence. And so to follow, to be a follower, to follow is that a follower is a logical consequence of something. To follow means also to act according to a lead. And another interesting thing is to follow is to pay close attention to. So to follow means to make sure that you're going along and paying attention to the details of a thing. And that's a really important thing to understand about followers, because followers are into the details in a way that sometimes a leader may not be aware of. So in order to follow, the follower has to be aware of the entire instruction and all of the details that come with it in order to execute, even if there are instructions that you're not even aware that you were doing, even if there's instructions that you're not even aware that you're transmitting, the follower is still responsible and will receive all of that energy and information. And so they're receiving all of the details that you're sending. Even if you are not aware that you're sending all of those details, the follower is receiving and paying attention to all of those details. Now, one of the biggest challenges, and I said that I was going to address this in this episode, which is how the idea of following can be very triggering for women because of how in this culture and in cultures around the world, gender roles are um, kind of laid out. And I'm actually going to have a special guest that's going to help me tackle some of that stuff head on through a different lens. So here in the Tutu Tango show, there's opportunities to hear what we do in multiple countries and multiple cultures. And so I'm very, very well aware that different cultures handle gender roles in very, very different ways. So right now I'm going to speak specifically to how the Western world, specifically in the United States or the North Americans, handle gender roles and some of the tug of war there, because it's a little definitely different in African countries, European countries, Asian countries, even South American countries, whole totally different dynamic and understanding of gender roles that is around religion and things like that. And so in the Western world, one of the primary places that influences the way that we have seen gender roles in the past is Christianity. And the story of Adam and Eve becomes kind of an undercurrent of how we perceive and understand the relationship between man and woman and gender roles. And like I said, depending on the different cultures and different beliefs, they may not perceive it that way, but that has a big influence on how the Western world, specifically in the United States, perceives or receives the idea of man and woman, masculine, feminine, husband and wife, lead and follow, yin and yang, the way they receive that. The reason that I bring that up is because out of that, oftentimes there is a perception of the hierarchical nature of gender roles. So gender roles are perceived in a hierarchical way, meaning one over another, one greater than another, one higher than the other. And so it can be very triggering for women because being a follower is perceived or understood to be a position of weakness, a position that is not of power. And as we move through different movements, feminine movement and feminine empowerment movements, women are saying, I don't want to be in a position that's weak. I don't want to be in a position where I'm giving up in my power or I'm being powerless or things like that. So sometimes in the beginning of this dance, it can be very, very triggering for women because if you were like me, when I first started, I'm like, ain't no man gonna tell me what to do. And no, we not in this like that no more. Even when I first started, I struggled with that idea. Um, I am actually going to have a special guest that's going to walk us through. She's a Hebrew scholar who's brilliant. Her work is brilliant. And we have to look that for because we literally are going to go through that Western understanding of the story of Adam and Eve that informs a lot of the way that we perceive gender roles right now. And she's going to give us some real interesting insights through the understanding of the original Hebrew text of that story and what that story is really telling us about the role of man and woman and the role of man and wife to one another. So it's going to be fascinating. So stay tuned to that because we are going to really go into that idea that kind of is the subtext and undercurrent of our understanding of gender roles. Why do I bring that up? Because I want everyone, both leader and follower, man and woman, masculine, feminine energy in this audience to understand is that in this dance, there is no hierarchy. Both roles are equal in value, different in function, but equal in value and interdependent. Remember, there is no leader without a follower. It's not about being oppressed. Followership is an equal position of power, and it is also a reassignment of that power for an agreed upon amount of time. It is voluntary and it can be annulled at any point in time. Now, annul is a big word to be used when you're having a relationship show. So I use that word carefully, but I use it very clearly. Stated another way, remember we talked about that in the leader, there is an assignment of power and or assigns like in a real estate contract. And so the follower is agreeing to loan their power to the leader. So the follower is willing to loan their power to the leader in order to achieve a shared vision, result, or outcome. A shared vision, result, or outcome. So they want to create a beautiful dance. She wants to have a beautiful, extraordinary dance as much as he wants to have a beautiful, extraordinary dance. She wants to be close to him the way that he wants to be close to them. They want to both be a vision of love and harmony on the floor and passion and beauty. They want to have that and they want to be that. And so she agrees to loan her power and her cooperation to the creation of that end. However, if at any point in time, he's not about the business of creating that vision and end, she can withdraw her power from that situation. She, just like she voluntarily gave it, she can voluntarily withdraw it because the agreement is that I will loan my power to this situation. But if this situation is no longer present, then I'm going to remove my resources from that situation. And so it's being in a position of following is not a position of powerlessness. It is not a position of giving up one's power. It is lending power. It is aggregating power to agree an agreed upon purpose. That's what that is. And so another way to say that is when they say about energy, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form. So that's literally what's happening between you and your partner. You're exchanging energy, you're transferring energy back and forth to one another. It's changing form from yin to yang, to yang to yin. So it's a transference of that kind of energetic power. Okay, so it's going from yang to yin, yin back to yang to yin back to yang. So if you're looking on the video, you can see my hands kind of being a demonstration of how this energy moves back and forth. However, if she withdraws or comes out of the embrace, then guess what? His energy and power is separate from hers now. And so then you don't have that cooperation and that co-creation. I like to say it because really that's what it is. When those two powers come together, there's an energy of co-creation, co-creating the dance, cooperation in creating the dance. So that is what following is. A leader is really just a steward of power. They are not a person who controls power. They are a steward of the power that has been assigned to them by the follower or followers that they have. So I like to talk to this up to people when it comes to leadership, because sometimes people get afraid of their leaders. And I love when that happens, only because it gives me an opportunity to remind them that the leader only is the leader as long as you agree to whatever it is that they're doing, or you're in agreement with it. At any point in time that you cease to be in agreement with that, then they're not the leader in it. Leaders are only empowered to the point and to the level that other people are willing to be in agreement with what they're doing. So at any point in time, from whether it's an organization to the military even, as long as people are in agreement with the decisions and the efforts and whatever, then fine, that's you're in power. There is power there. But if at any point in people say, you know what, I'm not going along with that. I'm not following that anymore. We good. And they leave the scene, then there is no power, because it once again it's an aggregation of what's being allowed and giving and loaned. So the biggest mistake that a follower makes, or the biggest misunderstanding that followers have about followership, is that they believe that following is a permanent loss of power and that they are disempowered by following, as opposed to believing that and understanding that following is a voluntary act because there's something that they believe in that they want to lend their power and strength to. Now, another place where that happens in terms of disempowering and feeling powerless and feeling a loss of power often happens also when the follower misunderstands the agreements that they have or that they're supposed to have with their leaders. And one of them is responsibility and accountability. So one of the agreements, the core agreements between a leader and follower, is that the leader understands that they are accountable for all of their actions and they are responsible for all of their actions. Well, as a follower who is on the receiving end of those actions, it is your role and your position and your place to hold the leader responsible and accountable for their actions. You already do some of that through your body, but when you understand that that is your role, which is to be in that position of accountability, because you are literally the consequence of their action, then you won't step into this place of feeling like following is a place of disempowerment or a permanent loss of power. Most of what the follower has to do and is responsible for happens before the dance ever starts. So it does happen that both the man and the woman is like 80-20 rule in full effect here. So there's definitely an 80-20 rule in the dance. And 80% of what makes the dance successful happens before the dance ever happens, before the first step is taken. So then the 20% is the rest of the dance's success, what you see moving on the floor. But from literally arriving to the venue up until the time you step into their brace and prepare to take that first step, that 80% is really where the bulk of the dance is happening. The setting up the relationship between the two, the setting up the embrace, the setting up the structure of the principles so that the dance can operate. And one of the ones that the follower is most responsible for is being discerning about whose lead they accept, whose lead they agree to lend their power to. That goes back to the top of the story when I was talking about the Pied Piper and the social media, and now we're following 100 or 200 or 1,000 different people or 700 different people. And so we have 700 different ideas, different feeds, different messages, different images, all coming to us all at the same time. And so our attention is going in 700 different ways, and our power, because attention is a part of our power, is our lack of focus, is going in 700 different ways. So the follower, if the follower wants to be in the position of understanding the power of their power, is to be very discerning and discriminating about whose lead they agree to follow. So that requires some discretion, that requires some discernment to determine who you are going to and who you are willing to follow. And are they going to be a good steward of you and your power? So that's what you want to be clear on. You want to be clear about clear and purposeful and thoughtful about the leaders you choose to follow. The leader or leaders in the political environment you choose to follow. It's like in that when you see in the political arena, the way that you choose a leader is that you have followers and they aggregate their power in the form of votes to lend their power so that the leader can make decisions on their behalf, hopefully good decisions and decisions that represent their interests. So you see that in the political arena. Similarly, in a relationship. So you have the power, the family choosing the head, what we would consider the head of the household or the leader of the household, to make decisions and choices and that are in the best interest and represent the interest of those who are in the household or those who are following the leader of that household. So you see that. So the key thing is before the invitation is accepted, the follower needs to do their homework and be clear and make that decision before the invitation is accepted. Now, how does that happen? Because in Buenos Aires, the culture of the dance is so beautiful. I love it. There's so much unspoken, nonverbal communication going on in the culture of tango that really helps inform so much. I mean, it's so funny because I've been dancing tango for so long, and I'm so accustomed to the nuances of the nonverbal communication that happens in the culture and environment of tango, that it's very shocking to me when I'm outside of that and the communication is so gross and so big and sometimes vulgar. It's just like I'm so used to the subtle that happens that when it's not subtle, sometimes it's very jarring even for me. But in the Environment of a milonga, which is a tango dance or a tango ball. The men and the women are usually sitting across from each other if they're single. So if you could think about, if you're looking at the webcast, you can see that I'm drawing a box with my hand. So if you can imagine a box in front of you, and where your chest is facing, that would be where the DJ is. An old school traditional milonga, the DJ would be facing the section of the room where the couples were sitting. And then on the sides flanking the DJ or the orchestra would be women on one side and men on the other side. So this is so the men and the women can make eye contact with each other across the floor. Because the married couples don't need to be making eye contact with anyone across the floor because their beloved is sitting right beside them. They are usually facing the DJ or orchestra. So there's the rules of etiquette in terms of people respecting the space of a couple. Usually in traditional tango environment, if a man and woman come as a couple, nobody else asks them to dance because you're respecting that their couple and their partnership is a boundary that you don't disrupt, you don't interrupt, you don't interject yourself into that. So because they don't need to be asking anybody else to dance because they're just dancing with each other, they face and enjoy the DJ. However, the men and the women are single men and women are sitting across from each other. So the men can invite the women to dance using their gaze. It's actually a sleight of head called the cabeceo. We'll talk about that in great detail in the future. But the sleight of head is called the cabeceo, where the man uses a gesture and a look and the way that he moves his head and his hand to ask a woman to dance before he approaches her. And then based on how she responds to that gesture, will give him permission to get up from his seat and go across the room to take her hand and going onto the floor. So the women are tasked with observing the gentleman discreetly to determine whether or not they will accept his gesture once he offers it. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. So most of her bulk is in observing the gentleman and how he moves in space and time, how he comes when he comes into the space, how he interacts with others, if he dances with other women, observing how he treats them, what kind of regard he has for other women and men in the space, how he handles himself with other couples on the floor. Even in Buenos Aires, the women pay attention to how many women he dances with, because in Buenos Aires, at least in old school in traditional environments, a woman doesn't want to dance in Buenos Aires with the man who is dancing with every woman in the room, because then that means that he does not appreciate or hold in high regard the value of her presence, because his energy is everywhere. He hasn't landed and seen that there was one particular woman, which is her, that he's in pursuit of for the evening primarily. And so if he's all over the place, then for traditional Argentine women, she's not about the man that's all over dancing with every woman in the room. So, but women from even other cultures are observing the way that the man handles himself socially, and then determining how, not only if she's going to give him permission, but how much permission is she going to give him as it relates to the dance. So these are the things that the follower gets to decide, so that her choice in terms of who she's going to follow is very, very conscious, very, very deliberate, very, very intentional, very, very informed. She's just not haphazardly, in a traditional sense, just dancing with every man in the room. She haven't watched him. She doesn't know anything about him. She hasn't observed any of his character and his character traits that you can see in how he interacts with others, how he handles himself. And also, once again, because this is a social environment, she could be observing him across multiple events. So I know in some circles, a woman will not accept a man's gesture for a number of events, so she can get to see if he's consistent. And it might be 3 or 4 events before she actually accepts his invitation three or four balls that they both attended to before she even will entertain his invitation. And he's aware that he's being watched, and that because she hasn't accepted his gesture sooner, that she's wants to observe him more before she accepts. So that's really, really important. And that is really kind of the bulk of her responsibility, to take great care in choosing the leader to follow, to vet him, to observe him in a variety of settings before she even agrees to his leadership. Be very careful that not only are you giving over power, or you loaning your power, but you're loaning trust and entrusting him. So you're entrusting the leader or the man with your safety and well being, even if just a few minutes on the floor. So you want to be mindful and careful and thoughtful in terms of, do you trust him based on what you've observed, to trust him with your well being for that 9 to 12 minutes. And this is I'll share a story. This a particular time, and it can be uncomfortable if the interaction is unsuccessful. I've had students where literally the gentleman has stepped on her foot and broken a toenail, or literally knocked an entire toenail off of the toe in the very short span of the dance, the 10 minutes. And so those kinds of injuries are significant if you're a woman. And so once again, you want to be very, very thoughtful about who you're trusting and entrusting with your well-being, even if you think it's for a short period of time. That short period of time can, result in, I've seen all types of injuries, in a twisting of an ankle, broken ankles, toes, toenails, twisted ankles, scratches. I've even myself an injury to my rib side. So you want to be very, very thoughtful about that, to make sure that your responsibility as a follower is to determine the boundaries. And so the woman or the follower decides the distance, and the leader respects that distance. So once she accepts the invitation to dance, the distance that she stands from him lets him know the type of embrace that she's comfortable with at that time. So it's up to the woman to decide and establish her level of comfort and those boundaries up front. So, for example, in the dance, if the woman stands, and when she accepts the dance, if she decides to dance, step in front of him 8 to 12 inches away, that means that she's saying, I'm only comfortable with open embrace right now. If she walks up to him, and when he offers the embrace to her, she puts her bosoms on his chest, that means that she's saying, I'm comfortable with being this close to you, and I'm comfortable with this type of embrace with you. So she establishes those boundaries. So you need to be clear as a follower about your responsibility in setting and maintaining boundaries that are comfortable for you. Then it's actually going to create tension in the dance, and could result in energy. So you're to receive the energy, absorb it, let it come out through your body, and then as it comes out, then it will provide feedback, because the energy will start to rebound back to him and give him feedback. And so you want to allow that. You don't want to resist the energy of the lead. You want to receive it once you've established that trust. You're translating the idea into physical form. That is your role. And you are also providing feedback through precision. What does that look like? Meaning, the way that you provide accurate feedback to the gentleman in this dance is by following his lead accurately, even if what you understand he is trying to do is different from what he does. So this is a bit of a challenge sometimes with ladies who are following, and definitely in a relationship, because you have an idea of what you could, especially if he's a beginner. You might have an idea of what he's trying to lead, but he may not actually be doing or executing the lead to get that result. And so what you try to do is you try to help him out by giving him the result that he's attempting to achieve, not giving him the result that he's actually led. The reason that you do not want to give him what he's trying to achieve, but giving him back what he's led, is because then he doesn't know the true result of what he's done and can't make the proper adjustments and corrections that he needs to strengthen his lead, to strengthen his communication, to strengthen his proficiency. So then if he does something somewhere else where he tries to do the same thing, he doesn't realize that the reason that it's not working out the way that he wants to is because that's not what he's leading. He hadn't figured it out yet. So, for example, if the man is trying to lead a baleo, but a baleo is not what's coming out, then don't try to do the baleo for him. Do and execute what he's led so that he gets the accurate and proper feedback. That is a beautiful thing. And because the key thing is you don't want to be outside of the flow of energy. So if you're doing something that he didn't lead, then now not only are you not helping him out because you've done something that wasn't what he led, but what it is he sent his energy in a certain direction. And you should be in the direction that his energy sent. And if you're not there, then that means you're no longer aligned with him. And that also means that you're not in position for what is coming next, which could put you in a place of not being safe. That is really, really important, because safety first. And the only way that a man can recover you in a safe position is if you are where he sent you. Even if he doesn't understand, if you are where he sent you, then he can recover by backing off or rebounding in the direction that he was, if that makes any sense. So I'll give you an example of that. And it's very, very rare in all of my years of dancing of getting injured or getting dropped or falling or anything like that, because I'm very, very proficient in following a man extremely accurately. And I remember this one time where I was dancing with a gentleman. He was a pretty proficient dancer in general, but there was something that he was leading that was really, really high speed, a very, very dynamic figure that he was leading. And he miscalculated how much force he gave me. So he sent way more energy and force than he realized he had for my weight and the fact that I was in heel. And so he sent way too much power and sent me way further and faster than he realized. As a result of that, because he had sent so much power in the dynamic, it put me in a position that was further from him than he had thought. And so what it did is it also put me in alignment where I wind up falling away from him. So he sent me too far, farther than he expected. He sent too much energy. So he wound up sending me almost outside of his embrace. And so therefore it put me in a position where I was just outside of his embrace. And so I was starting to fall backwards. Very precarious place to be, because that means I was just outside of his embrace enough to be in that direction. And only because he sent me there. So as I am going backwards towards the floor, I'm like, oh, snap. This is not a good look. But what I did is I didn't resist. I kept in the energy of where he was going. When he realized that I was going away from him in the embrace, though I was still in the embrace, what he did is he took his energy back in the opposite direction with just as much force. And so what happened? I got pulled back in. So he had sent me away, and then he was going. He realized, oh my goodness, if you're looking at the video, you can see my hands. He sent me away. And as I was going away, because I was in the embrace, the way that he was able to recover was literally just to step back with as much force as he was stepping forward. So when he stepped back, I went with him because I was in the embrace. And so he was able to recover. The reason that he was able to recover and I didn't get hurt is I didn't provide any resistance. And that required a great deal of trust on my part. But I wanted to say that to my leaders, because my followers, because they understand that your role is to follow. The only way that he can keep you safe is if he can see exactly what's going on and make adjustments based on that. And so that was a prime example. One of the few times that I've only hit the floor, I think once in my entire career. And this is the second time where I almost did, but didn't. The only other time that that happened was literally we were working on choreography. So it wasn't pure lead and follow in that situation. All right. So that's one of your roles and responsibilities. It's really, really important. One of the final key responsibilities that is the responsibility of the follower is that once the gentleman and you set up the embrace, your role as a follower is to maintain and sustain the connection and embrace that is established. Now, the gentleman, as a more advanced leader, may want to manipulate that, but at a very, very basic level, once you all establish the connection, your role as the follower is to maintain the connection. This is so important for both followers and leaders to understand so that gentlemen can understand the role of the woman in the dance, but also in the relationship. Her responsibility is to maintain the connection. Even if you try to break the connection, she's going to be attempting to maintain the connection because that was what agreed upon. That's what is agreed upon in this dynamic. Or what I like to say to followers when they're training, like once you connect with your man, you're on your man like white on rice. Like, that's your role, because the only way that you can allow the energy to complete the loop, the energetic loop between you and the leader, the only way that the principles can continue to work is once the embrace is established. When you maintain that, the dynamic will work. Okay, it's kind of like in literal power and electricity. Once you plug into the source, the power will run continuously until you either turn it off or you unplug it. So the current will continue to run. Once it's established, once it's plugged in, once it's connected, once that energy current is established, the energy will flow through the circuits or between the two until it's broken. And so the goal is to establish it and keep it there, even if it seems it's not working. Because the beautiful thing is, like when you plug in an appliance, like even if the appliance is turned off, there's still energy present, meaning the minute you turn on the appliance will work. When you unplug it, it breaks it. So then if it's unplugged and you turn it on, there's no power there. So the goal of the role and the goal of the follower is to stay plugged in. And the way they stay plugged in is they establish the connection to the leader. And that is where the magic happens. So just wanted to share with you that primer on what it means to be a follower in Tango. I think now that you've heard the fundamental structure of what it means to be a follower, what is the follower, the definition of a follower, and what are the key roles and responsibilities of a follower, and the key agreements between the leader and the follower. Now you can have a sense of the yin and the yang, the masculine and feminine of the dance of relationships. So there'll be additional details. You can go back through it and pull out these bullet points and to explore them in greater detail in your quiet time. Especially my followers, I want you to start to think about what criteria are you using to discern and be discriminating in the leaders that you choose to follow. Not only the leaders that you choose to follow online or even offline, but the leaders that you choose to follow in your life. Who are you choosing to follow? Who are you choosing to lend your power to? How much of your power are you lending to them? Have they demonstrated that they have the capacity and the capability to be a steward of your power? Can you trust them with your well-being? So these are the thoughts that you want to have as a follower. And any leaders that are listening to this, I want you to start to be thoughtful, because as you are are posed with this vetting process, you want to understand why are you being challenged and questioned in this way, both verbally and non-verbally by your potential followers. All right. Excellent. Well, you can find out about this and even more information on our website, www.the22, the number 22 Tango Show, .com, the www.the22tangoshow.com, or of course on social media at the 22 Tango Show on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We love sharing with you. You can find all the information there. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out onto social media and share with me so we can continue this dialogue and the dance of relationships. I'm Linda Sutton of the 22 Tango Show. And as we always say on the 22 Tango Show, it not only takes two to tango, but absolutely it takes you to tango. Ciao.
We have just concluded another moving episode of the 2 to Tango Show with Linda Sutton. Did you enjoy the show? If so, head over to the2totangoshow.com and discover a whole array of resources to help you spice up your relationship in every way. That's tangoshow.com. We would also like to hear from you, so don't forget to leave a review or feedback. Join us again next week for another entertaining and fun episode. Until then.